Hi guys, Juice here. I am here to film a part 2 of my 2020 wrap-up. This is going to be for the month of April through June. I was going to do it through May through July, but I realized the video I made yesterday was super long, and this video might be super long too, because this is the month of May and this is the month of June. May and June was my best reading month, and then my stack of April is right here. Let's just get started. The first 4 books I read in the month of April were library books. The first book was Morgan by Mary E. Pearson. This is a short story novella, part of the Kiss of Deception series that I mentioned yesterday. I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It was just a short story. Next, I read Imagine Me by Tahereh Mafi, the 6th and final book in the Shadow Me series. It's crazy that this series is already completed. It felt like yesterday the series was completed, even though it was completed back in March. I give that one a 5 out of 5 stars. That's definitely on my favorite list of 2020. Next, I have The Demon King by Sino William Chima, the same author who wrote the Warrior Heir series right here. I read The Demon King, and I give that one a 4 out of 5 stars as well. And then I read The Shadows Between Us by Teresa Levenseller, and I give that one a 4 out of 5 stars. And then going on with the books that I do own, we have Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahern. This is kind of blurry with the blinds that I have open. Serpent and Dove is the first book in a new trilogy by Shelby Mahern. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and I buddy read this with my friend Libby. Then I read Daughter of the Burning City by Amanda Foody. I almost said Teresa Levenseller. By Amanda Foody. This was Amanda Foody's debut novel, so I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And I buddy read this one with my friend Heather. Then I read Moment of Truth by Casey West. I gave that one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I reread a graphic novel called Check Please Volume 1. I don't know who the author is of this. I'll leave it down below if I can find it. Check Please Volume 1. It was a reread for me, so I give that one a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Ruthless Gods by Emily A. Duncan. This is a sequel to Wicked Saints, which came out last year, I believe, and I read that last year, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the sequel. So I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and this gorgeous copy came from Owlcrate. The next book I read is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kammerer. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Josh and Hazel Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren. I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite Christina Lauren, but I enjoyed that one nonetheless. Then I reread The Diviners by Libba Bray. I give that one a 5 out of 5 stars. I reread that, I think it was for a readathon. I don't know who was hosting the readathon for this one, but I know I wanted to reread the first 2 books because book 4 was finally coming out this year. Next I read was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This is a first book in a new series. I also read the sequel of this year, so spoiler alert for like the 3rd part of this series that I'm doing. I read the 2nd book of this book series this year, and I love both book 1 and 2. I think I love 2 a bit more just because there was more like stuff that happened in it. And I just cared about those characters more than this. So I really enjoyed this. I give this one 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read an arc that my friend Erin, she traded an arc with me, and that was Time of Our Lives by Emily Webley and Austin Sigma Broken. I don't know if it was just the art copy or if it was also like the physical book, but I thought the story was a bit incomplete, so I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I reread Layer of Dreams by Libba Bray, the sequel to The Diviners. I give that one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read You Are Not Alone by Gary Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And then the last book I read in April was Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the first book in a new trilogy by them, and I really love this trilogy so far. I gave this first book a 4 out of 5 stars, and if you haven't checked out the audiobook yet, you should. They're really good. And going on to May. Moving on to May, I read 20 books in May. I'm telling you, May and June was my best reading month of the year. Some of these are library books, of course, so starting out with the first book I read in May was The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This was the first book I read in the month of May, and I really enjoyed it, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't know anything about this book going into it other than there was a sibling bonding aspect in here, and it was also about Mozart. So those are like the only 2 things I know about this book before I picked it up. And then just look at this pretty Owl Crate edition. Thank you again, Owl Crate, for putting this in your box. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I usually generally enjoy all the Owl Crate picks, so I still have a lot to read, so hopefully I can get them off my shelf before I start over again with Owl Crate in 2021. The next book I reread because I was doing my Shadowhunter reread, and I kind of took a break of it from the rest of the year, and that is Clockwork Prince by Cassandra Clare. This is a sequel to Clockwork Angel, which I mentioned in my video for yesterday. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This one I really enjoyed, and I'm so happy I reread this because there was a lot of things that I forgot about this that happened in this book. Next I read was Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This is the 3rd volume in this series. I believe there's going to be one more, and then it might be over. I'm not too sure what the how many books are going to be in this graphic novel series, but this is just so cute. It's literally just black and white, and like the writing is easy to read, and I just like read this in like one sitting, and I really enjoyed it. I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and this is definitely a favorite read of 2020. If you guys would like a video of me showing off my favorite reads of 2020 so far, because we are in October, so we only have 2 months left of the year, which is crazy, I can do that for you guys if you want. The next book I read was Before the Devil Breaks You by Liva Bray. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read this for the first time in May, and I really loved it. I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Again, that's a library book that I don't have. The next book was also a reread. The month of May was mostly rereads for me, if you can't tell, and that is The Crowns Game by Evelyn Skye. This was the first book in a new duology. I read this back when it first came out, and I also bought the sequel the day the sequel came out, but I never read it, and I still haven't read the sequel yet. It's sitting on my TBR shelf. I read this in the month of May because I buddy read this with my friend Heather, and then we were all gonna buddy read. Heather and I was gonna buddy read the sequel, but we just haven't had the chance yet. So Heather, if you want to buddy read the sequel of this, let me know. I really enjoyed this reread. I think the first time I read it was a 3 stars, and now this time I gave it a 4 stars. Then I decided to randomly reread the Hunger Games trilogy, so I reread the Hunger Games, and then I reread Catching Fire. Very glary with the lights. Catching Fire is still my favorite in the series. I don't know how to make that stop. Oh well. Catching Fire is still my favorite book in the series. I haven't reread Mockingjay yet, but I want to try and reread Mockingjay because The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is out now, and I really want to read that one as well. The next book I read was for my 5-star prediction TBR that I made last year, and I finally got around to reading those books, and that is King of Scars by Leigh Bardugo. Again, another shiny book that will cause problem with the light. This is the first book in the Nikolai duology. Book 2 is called Rule of Wolves. That's really hard for me to say for some reason. It's coming out January, I think, of next year, or it's coming out later in the year. I can't remember exactly, but look at this gorgeous cover. I bought this when I was working at my first job, and I never read it until now, so I read this over the summer just for a quick fantasy read, and I really enjoyed it. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I can't wait for the sequel. Next book I have is The Gravity of Us by Phil Stanford. I picked this up at Barnes & Noble back in February when it was coming out, and I didn't read it, so I don't know why I didn't read it, but I read it now in the month of May, and I felt like summertime is just a perfect time for reading contemporary books, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. And then the next book I read was one of my favorite books of 2020, and that is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 7th and final book in the Throne of Glass series. I finally completed the series, and I am really happy with how this wrapped up. I did felt like it was a little bit rushed, but I also do feel like there will be like another spin-off series maybe. They probably won't be, but like I completed this book, like 1,000-page novel it was, and I really enjoyed it. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read, after I read a huge fantasy novel, I wanted to read a contemporary. So I picked up Clean Getaway by Nick Stone. I read that and I gave that 3 out of 5 stars. Then the next book I don't have, but I really want to get, and that is Felix Ever After. I forgot who the Kaysen Callender, I think, is who the author of that one is. I love this contemporary story. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. If you love Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda, you would definitely love Felix Ever After. The next contemporary book that I read was You Asked for Perfect by Laura Silverman. Either my friend Heather or my friend Sydney, I can't remember which one got me this book. Let's see. Oh, Heather. My friend Heather gave me this book for birthday or for Christmas. I can't remember which one, but they've been meaning me to read this for a while, and I was like, it's not really my thing, but I picked it up this month, or in the month of May I should say, and I really enjoyed it, so I give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Hold Still by Nina LaCour, another book that my friend Heather got me, and I read this one, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, the same author who wrote The Poet X and With the Fire on High, and I read all of her books by now, and I love each and every one of them. This one is my favorite out of the 3, I think, just because it's written in verse. So if you don't know what written in verse means, it's like poetry, so it's like that throughout the novel. And I just read this in 2 days just because I didn't want this book to end, so I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read King of Crows by Libba Bray, the 4th and final book in the Diviners series. I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. That's a favorite book of 2020 for me. And then I wanted something short. I didn't want like a super high fantasy novel, so I went with Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker by Ray Carson. This one I was kind of disappointed by. I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars, and I enjoyed it. It just wasn't my favorite. It felt like after seeing the movie when I read this, I was like, yeah, I know what happens in here now. So yep, 3 out of 5 stars. Not my favorite Star Wars, but I still recommend the audiobooks for these. The next book I have is Arusha and the Tree of Wishes by Roshani Chakshay. This is the 3rd book in the Arusha series from Rick Riordan Presents, and I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I just love this one. This is definitely my favorite, I think, in the series. Even though I give this one a 4 stars, I was just remember how I was just like laughing throughout this book, and it was very funny. There's a cliffhanger for this, and I was mad at this cliffhanger, and I'm still mad to this day. I can't wait for book 4 to come out. It has a gorgeous cover. I'll leave the cover reveal down below. And Roshani Chakshay and Rick Riordan both said there's gonna be 5 books in the series. Roshani is currently writing book 5, and so I'm really excited to see where that will take us. And then I read one of BookTube's highly hyped up books, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. And then the last book of May I read was Of Curses and Kisses by Cynthia Menon. This is her new book in the romance novel section. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and I really enjoyed it, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So those are the books I read for May, and now let's get on with the month of June. So for the month of June, I've read 25 books, and half of these books are library books, so that's why I read so much in the month of June. Like literally I have 2 pages just for June, and I don't think I ever had 2 pages of wrap-ups for a month before. So let's just get through these. A lot of these are books I've been meaning to get to in the month of 20 or in the year of 2020, so I'm actually happy that it was the month of June. The first book I read because it was part of a readathon that is no longer happening, but I wanted to read it nonetheless, and that was Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in a new series by him. I think this is a standalone currently, but there's going to be a sequel to this soon. I don't know when, but I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. I actually reread this one, and I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. That was a library book that I don't have. And then I have Yes, No, Maybe So by Becky Albertalli and Aisha Sadeed. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really love this contemporary story, and I love these 2 main characters that we had in here. They made me laugh so much, and I definitely recommend this if you want like a book to get you out of your reading slump. Then the next book in the month of June I read was The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This is the short story collection part of the Grisha universe, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but this is a really pretty book, so is that a bad reason to say you're keeping a book? But that's my excuse. The next book I read was the final book I needed to read for my 5-star prediction TBR. Was this a 5-star? I don't know. And that was Furyborn by Claire Legrand. This is the first book in the Furyborn trilogy. I just got my hands on the 3rd and final book of this trilogy. So in November, I am binge reading book 2 and book 3 and hoping to wrap this trilogy up this year. And I give this first one a 4 out of 5 stars, and I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to continue on with this trilogy. The next book I read was To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christio. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read one of my graphic novels that I got from Owl Crate. We got this in our May box, and that was Witchy by Ariel Salamte Rees. I totally butchered that name, I'm so sorry. I love this graphic novel. It was very magical, very witchy, in case you can't tell. I feel like this book is going to get a sequel soon, because I felt like it left off on a cliffhanger. So I really can't wait if there's going to be a sequel to this. I hope Owl Crate does the cover reveal for it soon. I give this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and it was just a fun, quick, easy graphic novel. Then I read one of my favorite books. Oh, I didn't give this a 4 out of 5 stars. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, by the way. And then I read one of my poetry books that I've been wanting to read for a while, and that is The Black Flamingo by Dean Etta. I give this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read A Court of Frost and Starlight by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3.5 novella part of the ACOTAR trilogy, which is down here on my bottom shelf. I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I felt like I should read this one in 2020. If I was able to complete Kingdom of Ash, then I should have been able to complete this, and that's what I did. I completed this, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and I gave this by Talia Hilbert, and I give this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I definitely will read the sequel to this. I don't know when, but I will. Probably sometimes next year when the 3rd book comes out. I really enjoyed this. It wasn't my favorite book, but I still will recommend this book. Then I read Supernova by Marissa Meyer, the 3rd and final book in the Renegades trilogy, and I give that one a 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Snot Girl Volume 1. I don't know who the person or the author of this book is, but it was a graphic novel, and I gave that 3 out of 5 stars. Then I finally finished the Archive duology by Victoria Schwab. I finally read The Unbound. I know this book title says it's The Dark Vault, but it's a bound up of The Unbound. and The Archive. The Archive is the first book, and then it's The Unbound. I finally read The Unbound this year, and I give that one a 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read Famous in a Small Town by Emma Mills. This was a short, easy, contemporary novel to read, and I just really enjoyed it, and I give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Snot Girl Volume 2 and Volume 3 back to back, and I gave both of them 4 stars. Then I read A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kemmerer. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I didn't really love the sequel. She added a character in this book that I thought was not necessary to add in, but I just overall was a little disappointed by this one, and I hope the third book would be better. The next book that I read was Star Wars Queen's Pearl by E.K. Johnson, another Star Wars novel that I mentioned in this video. I love reading these books. Like I said, if you haven't checked out the audiobooks for this, you should. This is by E.K. Johnson, by the way. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and I read this during a camping trip as well, so that has a little memory to it. Then I read My Calamity Jane by Cynthia Han, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. I read this one during my camping trip as well, and I really loved it. I give it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Tea Dragon Tapestry by Katie O'Neill. This is the third installment in the Tea Dragon series, which actually came out in September, but I don't hear anyone talking about it just because it is a graphic novel, and graphic novels don't really get a lot of hype on BookTube. But I give The Tea Dragon Tapestry a 5 out of 5 stars. And then after that, I read Lifelike by Jay Kristoff. One of my friends on Instagram, they sent me this book because they saw it on my Amazon wishlist, and they sent this to me on my way because I know I talked to them about wanting to read this book, but I didn't want to like purchase it myself, so they purchased it for me, and I read it, and I give this one 4 out of 5 stars. And then I read The Revolution of Birdie Randolph by Brandy Colbert. I give that one a 4 out of 5 stars. I actually read that book because of my friend Heather. And then the last 3 books are my 5-star reads of the month, and that was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This is a book that I read on my camping trip, but I finished this when I got home from my camping trip, when I had a camping trip in June, and I really enjoyed this. This is my #1 favorite read of 2020. I will tell you that right now. Unless a new release from October, November, and December happens. But I can say this is my #1 favorite read of 2020 so far. I gave Home Before Dark a 5 out of 5 stars, in case that wasn't clear. This is by Riley Sager, and I would say trigger warning for death of a family member, trigger warning for a haunted house if you don't like that, and trigger warnings for blood, death, and snakes. That's what I wrote on my little sticky note inside. So I really enjoyed this. I can't wait to read more, and I know he has a new book coming out next year. I almost said next month. Next year is when his new book is coming out. And then the last 2 books in the month of June was Burn by Patrick Ness. I give this one a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star for me, but there is dragons in this book, and that's what sold me on it, and I really enjoyed it, and I give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This was my first Patrick Ness book in a while. I know he released some other books previously to A Monster Calls, but like A Monster Calls was my first book by him, and I teared up in A Monster Calls, and this was a fun young adult fantasy novel all about dragons set in modern day world. So I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read more by Patrick Ness. And then the last book I read is a super short novella, and that is Love Creekwood by Becky Albertalli. Yes, I read another Becky Albertalli novel this month, and I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. Even though it's like super short, I probably won't count this as like my top at the top favorites, but I will mention this in my favorite books of 2020 so far. I really enjoyed it. I literally read this in an hour, not even like one day. I read this in like 1 hour. And if you're a fan of Nick Stone's books and Angie Thomas's books, there's a surprise in here for those people who love those two authors like me. I'm real happy that I read this. Is it worth $15? Not really, but I did it just to support Becky Albertalli, and I love this universe, so it was nice to be back in it for a little bit. So yeah, there you have it. Those are all the books that I read from the month of April to June. I will have a part 3 of this series for July through October if you guys want one, because October is almost over, and then my last part 4 would just be November and December. But yeah, I am real excited to do the next half of this series video idea that I have, and I hope you guys like this video. It's again another long video, but thank you so much for watching, guys. Give me a big thumbs up if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll talk to you guys later down in the comments, and I hope you have a great day or night, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.